Welcome to the creative community. I'm your host, David Starkey, and my guest this time is Scott DeVine, the Executive Director of the Ensemble Theatre Company. Scott, welcome.
Welcome, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great always to have someone from Ensemble to come over, and I'm really happy to meet you. Tell us a little bit about how you sort of found your way. I'm sure it's a long story.
Yeah. It is a long story. I'll try to do the short version.
Right.
So I'm an East Coast person, grew up in Pennsylvania, spent most of my time in New York, running a performing arts center for a number of years.
Which one?
It's called the Performing Arts Center in Purchase, New York, north of New York City.
Right.
And moved out to California about 15 years ago now.
Okay.
An opportunity came out here, so moved out here, and have been for the last 12, 15 years focusing my time on producing art in the theater, mainly. And spent about 12 years in the Bay Area in San Francisco at a theater called TheaterWorks Silicon Valley, where I was the CFO and general manager for 12 years. And about a year and a half ago, the opportunity came up to come here to Santa Barbara, and it's such a beautiful community. I couldn't not take it. And so I've been here for about a year and a half at the Ensemble. Trying to get things re-going again after the pandemic. It's I think, as we'll talk about a little later, the industries really took a hit coming back out of the pandemic.
Yeah,
and so,
it's got to be one of the toughest industries to be in, because you need those butts in the seats.
Yeah, shutting down for 2 years really hurt the industry, and audiences have been slow to come back. And we're dealing with the same inflationary issues that everybody else in the world with the business is dealing with. So it's been a challenge, but we're doing well, and our audiences are coming back, and our patrons have been amazingly supportive. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, that's great. Well, now, I'm curious, were you like a theater geek when you were growing up? Were you drawn to that world, or was that something that you came to later?
I came to it later. I always loved the arts. I was more into music as a kid. But when I was in college, and a friend of mine was directing one of the student productions, and as anyone who's in theater may know, especially in colleges and high schools, there's always plenty of female actors, but never enough male actors. And so she convinced me to come on and try out for one of the shows, and I kind of got hooked into the creative process and everybody working together. And theater is a unique art form in the sense, to me, that it is a collective experience. You need that audience in the space for the actors to have that energy to continue through their performances. So I really just fell in love with the process of the arts.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested how you got from an acting gig in college to sort of more behind the scenes. How did that transpire?
Yeah. So I was thinking about going to law school when I was in college. That was the original plan. And as I said, I really got bitten by the arts, in theater in particular, and decided that I had acted in college, but I wasn't a good actor. That wasn't my skill set.
Okay.
That wasn't my skill set. But I am good at business. I am good at finances and running organizations. And eventually, throughout my career, I found out that I was pretty good also at selecting shows, artistically, kind of helping to manage that process. And so I decided to really devote my time to the art, to supporting the art that was on stage.
Well, let's. We have a chance to look at before we start talking about your new season, the 2023-24 season. We got an image here. What do you know what this is?
So this is Christmas Carol. So this was our holiday show last year. As I mentioned, audiences have been a little slow to come back to the arts. But we had two shows last year that were really breakouts, which I gave you some images for we can talk about today. So Christmas Carol, which is our holiday show, we tried to pick a show that we thought would help bring audiences back, and not just audiences, but families. Multi-generational was the goal for this show, to have grandparents and parents and kids all in the theater together, which we had was amazing. Ended up being our second highest grossing show all time. Was A Christmas Carol. So we really saw the audiences come back. and see, a number of people come and see the show multiple times.
Yeah.
So it was a great hit for us.
And it's my understanding that those Christmas shows can be big breadwinners for theaters that can make up for slimmer times throughout the year.
They are. A lot of theaters, and even other arts organizations, ballets will do nutcrackers every year.
Yeah.
We talked for a long time this year when we were planning the season about, should we bring the Christmas Carol back? Should we try to make that a tradition for us? And we decided ultimately that what we wanted the tradition to be for the holidays was a family show that you could bring the whole, the whole family to, but not necessarily the same show over and over again. I think we see part of our mission to introduce new and different things to our audiences all the time. And so the idea of taking one of our 5 slots and saying, oh, that's always going to be this,
you got 4
didn't really
slots
feel
then.
quite right to us.
And I think that's one of the things I've always appreciated living here in our smallish town, that you guys do bring so many new plays, and so glad you made that decision.
Yeah.
So this next shot is from...
this was Seared. So this was our last play of the season. It was a really interesting show set in a kitchen, as you can tell. So on a stage, if anybody who came to see the show, we had built a full working restaurant kitchen on our stage, and the actors were actually cooking food every night on stage, so you could get the aromas and the smells in the theater. And the audiences really reacted pretty strongly to this show too. So it ended up eclipsing A Christmas Carol as our number 2 selling show all time. So we were grateful this year that we got audiences to start coming back.
Yeah. That
we had 2 shows that did really well for us.
Yeah. Now, as you're talking to people after the performances, are you hearing, wow, this is so great to be back with all,
We are. I think a lot of our core audiences have been back now for a year and a half or so. But we've been focusing heavily on developing new audiences. Over the course of our entire season last year, 20% of the people who came to our show was the first time they'd ever come to an Ensemble Theatre show. So we've really been spending a lot of time trying to develop new audiences and get new people into the show, as well as getting our older subscribers and patrons back.
Well, this is a question that probably every theater company in America wants to, know the answer to. How did you do that? How did you find that? How did you get those 20% of people?
A lot of advertising. So we substantially increased our marketing this year. I hope people see little ads all over the place for Ensemble, for our shows coming up. We've done a lot more social media than we've done before. We're certainly focused on trying to attract a kind of under 50 audience is kind of what we call younger audience. That's been a big target for us, so we've done a lot more on social, Facebook, Instagram, doing a lot more video promotion, those kinds of things.
And that's great, because those are the people who are going to keep theater alive in the future.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm going to move on here and take a moment to preface our 2023-24 season. And this is a season that you put together yourself.
Yeah. So I think, as probably most people know, Jonathan Fox was the artistic director at Ensemble for about 17 years.
He was, yeah.
And did an amazing job and did that season, which we were just looking at. But as I became aware that he was leaving and our board became aware, I really stepped up and took a little bit more of a forefront in planning the season. So this is the season which I put together for Ensemble.
So Jonathan's kind of a legend in town.
Yeah.
And did you feel any nervousness about living up to his standards?
I mean, he was still around when we were planning it. Right. So if I was getting too far off base, I think he probably would have said, "Scott."
Come back here.
And we have a great relationship, Jonathan and I. I only got to work with him for a little more than a year, but it was really amazing to work with him, and he's great.
He is a great guy. Yeah. Well, let's start off here with the first one, and this is kind of the overall poster, and then the first thing we have is the Thanksgiving play.
Yeah.
Now this is an interesting play.
Yeah, I really found this play. I was reading an article, I think it was in the Times, about this playwright named Larissa Fasthorse, who was a Native American playwright. She actually ended up being the first Native American playwright to have a show produced on Broadway this past year, and it was this play, the Thanksgiving play. And she had been commissioned by regional theaters all over the country, as you might imagine, is a great Native American playwright, to write plays about the Native American experience. And she kept finding that once she had written the plays, she gave them to the theaters who had paid her to write them, and they said, no, we can't produce this play. It's got too many Native American characters in it. We can't cast it. And so it was really frustrating.
Sure.
And so she wrote this play, the Thanksgiving play, kind of in response to that, saying to all those theaters, well, here's a play that still deals with the same issues, but is an all at least white appearing cast.
Oh, interesting.
And so basically, if you can't cast this,
then you don't want to do my
stop,
play.
Right, then stop that. And it's a really interesting play. So it's set in an elementary school, and a teacher has been tasked with the job to write a play that celebrates Thanksgiving, while also being true to Native American Heritage Month. And so she's trying to mesh those two things together to be true to both of those things. And I think this season, which we'll talk about as we talk through it, is really a lot about truth. It's a lot about the truths around, this play is around the truths about what we've learned about our past as a nation, what we think we know, and maybe what we don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's going to be a fascinating play, and it's actually playing before Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
but
so we're in October, so leading up to the holiday.
Yeah, right. So, we know that we'd like to keep our shows evergreen, so someone may be watching this far into the future,
Sure.
but this is October the 2nd, or 5th through the 22nd of 2023. And then you're going to go to a musical, interesting, Ring of Fire.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, I mean, when we're looking at the holiday show, so this is our December show, so this is our, Christmas holiday.
The one you just said for everyone to come.
Show that we want everybody to be able to come to. And as I was looking for shows that I thought meant that characteristic, one thing to me is music, as I said before. Mm-hmm. That's really what got me into this business. And also just ideas of things that are universal to families. I think a lot of people know who Johnny Cash is. I thought it was really interesting the ties locally that Johnny Cash has. A lot of people don't know for a period of time he lived in Casita Springs.
I did not know that.
So he has a house. His family lived here for 4 or 5 years. They moved out of LA. His daughter had some asthma issues, and they wanted to get out of kind of even way back when, the pollution and things in LA, and moved up here. And so I thought it was interesting that he had ties to the community. And it is just a fun show. It's essentially a 90 or 100-minute concert of Johnny Cash's greatest music, telling the story of his life. Mm-hmm.
So I know that in the description it said it kind of, if you wanted to see the story of his life, you would watch the movie Walk the Line. But if you want to hear the music, this is the place to go.
Yeah, it really features the music. As I said, when people walk into the theater, I think what they'll see for this show is a band. They'll see 5 musicians on stage. So this is a different kind of musical for a theater production. Mm-hmm. There is no actors on the stage and band in the pit. These are actor-musicians, so all the actors who are on stage will be playing their own musicians live on stage during the performance.
Oh,
and
cool.
so it'll be a lot like a concert.
Yeah, that sounds cool. The Pianist of Williston Lane.
Yeah, so this is a show which I had presented when I was, prior to coming here, I spent time in the Bay Area at TheaterWorks, as I said, and this is a show we presented, I think, back in 2013, and it was really touching show. So this is a show about a woman who, during World War II, there was a thing called the Kindertransport, where they took kids out of Germany and Austria and sent them to England to try to get them away from the war and save them. And this is the story about one of those girls, Lisa Jura, whose grandfather won 1 ticket on the Kindertransport and had 3 granddaughters.
Oh my gosh.
And had to make the unbelievable choice of who he was going to send. The story is more about her time once she gets to London and is living her life. She ended up being a great concert pianist and did a lot of teaching, so music education was really important to her. But the story is told on stage by a woman named Mona Golubeck, who is Lisa's actual daughter, also a concert pianist, who will be here in Santa Barbara doing the performance every night, telling the story of her mother. It's a really touching and beautiful story.
Yeah, it sounds like do not miss this under any circumstances.
Yeah.
So that's in February. And then we have the Lehman trilogy in April. Tell us about that.
So the Lehman Trilogy, I think a lot of people have probably heard of this show. It was on Broadway. It was done in LA a number of years ago. It's 3 actors on stage telling the story of the Lehman Brothers. But it's not a story about the rise and fall of Lehman Financial. That's the context in which the story is set around, but it's really the story of a family immigrating to the United States. And the trials and tribulations that family went through to survive, to build a legacy for their family, not just a business, but multiple generations, and really tells the story of this one immigrant family over 200 years in this country, as they go through the challenges that every family that came to this country has gone through. And I think we're going to tell this story as a more personal, an immigrant story, much more than a story about the rise and fall of a company.
Yeah, as the note says, ultimately bringing the global economy to its knees. That's another way to look at it.
They happen to have done that also, but this story
it's more sympathetic.
Is again really about what a family will do to support itself, and how the family that you root for in the beginning of this play, as they are working to build their family and survive, might turn into the family that you root against at the end when they're making some decisions that hurt a lot of people.
Yeah, wow. Well, that sounds really fascinating too. And then finally in May and June, Alice, formerly of Wonderland.
Alice, formerly of Wonderland. So this is unique for Ensemble a little bit. It's a world premiere. We haven't done a lot of those. So this is a play which is brand new, which we're still working on. Actually, we're doing a workshop up here in October with the playwright and some actors to continue to work on it. But this is the story of, I should have said, all of these stories are true stories.
Yeah.
Which is really, I think, was an important through to me as I was putting the season together, the truth that exists in all of these stories. So this is a story about the girl which Alice in Wonderland was based on. A girl named Alice Little, who grew up in England. She was her father was a dean at Oxford at the same time Lewis Carroll was at Oxford. Obviously, he wrote the story Alice in Wonderland based on her. As she was a young woman still at Oxford, the Prince of England, Prince Leopold, went to Oxford, and for a brief time, the two, Alice and Leopold, had an affair.
Wow.
And so this is the telling of that story, their romance. So it's a story a lot of people don't know about. It's a really lovely story, and there's a lot of humor, and as you might guess, the Queen is opposed to their romance of a commoner and her son. But it's a lot of fun, and it is a musical, but it's also a unique musical in that it's an a cappella musical, so there's no musicians at all.
Wow.
It's all in the tradition of Oxford, I don't know if you know, has a great tradition of a cappella music. And so in that tradition, all the music is done a cappella.
Wow, that puts a lot of strain on the actors, I would imagine, yeah.
It does indeed, which is in part why we're doing a workshop of it later this year to try to start pulling that all together.
Yeah. So a couple of musicals in there. My stepdaughter is an actor at Long Beach Playhouse, and I know that the musicals are the ones that pull folks in generally. Why do you think that is?
I think generally musicals tend to attract a wider an audience. I think they attract a younger and older audience as well. I think often families feel more comfortable coming to that than a straight play. Yeah, so I think that's part of it. I think they tend to be more user friendly. I think audiences just find them easier to take in than just sitting there and watching somebody on stage.
There's something about the music that adds to the drama, and also, you're right. It's somehow more appealing. Well, as we move away from your season, I am curious to talk a little bit about the state of theater. There have been a flurry of articles, people talking about, as you said, folks not necessarily coming back, there not being as much money, shows being canceled at the Geffen, for instance. So tell us a little bit how Ensemble is bucking the tradition.
We're trying our best, and we're doing well. I think our fiscal year's just ended. It looks like we've slightly exceeded our income goals for the year. which is a positive for us for right now. As I think it is a bit of a bucking of the trend. Audiences are coming back. We're still probably down about 15% of our overall audience from where we were pre-pandemic, but we're certainly seeing them coming back. And Santa Barbara's community as a whole, the patrons, the donors, have all been so supportive. We're very, very fortunate to be here in Santa Barbara community that really just loves the arts and supports the arts in so many ways. And we're, as you can tell by this season, we're leaning in. We think audiences are coming back. We think our audiences are coming back. We think that if we give them shows that are fun and entertaining while still being provocative and inspiring imagination and provoking thought, which is something we all want all of our plays to do. We want audiences to leave the theater with something to talk about afterwards. We think they'll continue to come back, and we're optimistic about where the arts in Santa Barbara at least are going. If
for some odd reason a theater director in another state that wasn't full of wealthy people happened to be watching the show, and as you say, you're kind of a financial whiz, what would you advise those people to do who don't have our resources to keep their theater companies going?
Yeah, I think really understand your audiences, understand what your audiences are looking for. I think part of this season, I think one thing which is slightly different for our season coming up 23-24 than the past season is we've leaned a little bit more into entertainment. We've heard a lot from our audiences, and I think we've heard from audiences around the country that there's a lot of heavy things going on in the world right now, and a little bit lighter entertainment, not fluff entertainment, but being able to spend a couple hours in the theater and not walk out with those same heavy issues is something that they're interested in. I think our season does that. I think theaters around the country are seeing, when I talk to my peers around the country, that if they do a show which leans a little bit more to the entertainment, leans a little bit more towards the popular, without going too far.
Right.
They're seeing the audiences coming back for those shows. And so I think that's something we as an industry have to adjust to. Right. We all want to provoke thought. That is a big part of what theater is.
I mean, that's one of the main things I think about theater is tackling these deep, dark issues.
And I think finding ways to do that while still doing something that's a little more popular. Thanksgiving Play is a great example of that. So this is a show which was just on Broadway, did really well on Broadway, but also deals with some pretty serious issues of how this country treated Native Americans as people were immigrating into the country. Right. So it deals with those issues in and I hope, a funny and fun way, while still dealing with serious issues.
Yeah. I'm curious, as someone who put this season together, you chose 5 plays, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, of plays out there that you could have selected. How do you do that? I mean, it must be a really kind of hit and miss process, or do you have a pattern? What's your method for doing that?
It can feel hit and miss. First off, it's not just me.
Right, sure.
Our staff reads. I love to get suggestions from our board and other donors of things they'd like to see on stage. So it is definitely a collaborative process. I try to think about all the various types of audiences we have, younger, older audiences, musicals versus non-musicals, and weigh all those things together and put a season together that I think at least has an opportunity to touch as many different kinds of people as possible.
That's interesting. Now, I know we've been talking about the season proper, but Ensemble has a lot of other programs that it's trying to do. There was a playwriting workshop, and Tell us a little bit about.
So we have a lot of educational programs as well. A great guy, Brian McDonald, who's our director of education, artistic associate, who's actually directing that first play, the Thanksgiving Play. Brian's actually directing for us. Does an amazing job with our education programs. Does a lot of playwriting courses, acting courses. Has done some acting for adult classes, which we saw do really well this year. We'll probably continue. He's working on some new programs, some educational programs that might help to meld businesses with the arts, ways to, using theater arts to help businesses deal with some of their own issues. So I think we've got some exciting things coming up in the education programs that are new ways to look at the way theater and education might help.
All right. Well, as the executive director now, by the way, we've got about 4.5 minutes left. What are some of your visions for things that you'd like to do? Because that's obviously one of the interview questions they ask. You know, what do you see Ensemble becoming in the next 5 or 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, I want to see us continue to grow. I want to see the audiences continue to come back. I want to build new audiences. I'd love, as I mentioned before, to get even more of that 50 and under group into the theater. I think that means new and exciting programming, not just what's on the stage, but things around the stage. We're doing a lot more events around our production. So we have found that like our talkbacks that we do after the show, our dramaturgical talks that we do before the shows, those things have become really popular. And so we've added a new Wednesday matinee this year, which we haven't had in the past. That's going to have an additional talk around that to try to build extra things around our performances to help audiences understand what we're doing, why we're doing them, what we hope they're taking out of those stories. And then we're also working on, we'll be announcing soon, I hope, community partnerships for each of our productions coming up for this season. So we're going to select another nonprofit somewhere in Santa Barbara or in the region that we're going to partner with on each of our shows. So we did this last year with a show we did called The Children, which was about global warming and those kind of issues. And we partnered with an organization called One Tree Planted, where for every ticket we sold to that show, we donated $1 to that organization.
Oh, wow.
And with that dollar, they planted a tree. And so we ended up, I think, planting 3,200 trees just based on that partnership. So we're looking to do more community partnerships like that as well.
That's good. Do you have any specific ones in mind for the shows?
We have some ideas, but I'm not sharing that.
You're not ready to get that
Stay
on camera.
tuned.
Yeah. Well, you know, so in the last couple of minutes that we have together, I just kind of, anything else that's on your mind as a you know, someone in the theater, things that are, you know, that I wouldn't know to ask about?
I think that my closing message would be just to the audience out there, to anyone who hasn't come back to the theater, to come back. Yeah. It really is an art form that requires people to be in the space when we're doing it. And we're doing, as I said, we're doing well. I think we're probably back within 15 or 20% of our audience, where our peers are maybe closer to 40 or 50%. So we're doing well, but we still got plenty of space. We've got tickets for all of our shows starting at $40 or under. Yeah. So there's an opportunity for people to come and see our shows and be part of that conversation, be part of the art form. The audience is an integral part of what makes theater theater. Having the people in the space reacting to what the actors are doing on the stage is a vital part of what we do. And so I just encourage everyone out there to pick one of these shows. Pick one and come see it. Yeah,
because I think as someone who's over that age 50 category and in the pandemic, I think it was easy to sort of, if you'd gone to a lot of theater, to kind of recalibrate and start watching TV and movies and stuff like that. I mean, what's that one thing that you can do to get that person off the couch and into the theater?
Do you know?
I don't.
I was hoping maybe you had an answer.
I don't have a secret.
I mean, what we're trying to do is we're trying to put various stories out there. I think we're trying to use truth as a hook for this season, obviously. I think people like true stories. And so I hope that inspires some people to come back. I think just reminding people that communal experience, what they're missing by not coming back to it. Just think back to, if you haven't been back to the theater since 2020, think back to what that last experience when you were in the theater with other people and you were laughing or crying together, what that felt like being part of that, and come back to it.
Wow, that is a beautiful way to end the show. That is so eloquent. Thank you so much, Scott.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. The Creative Community is a co-production of TVSB in Santa Barbara and CAPS Media in Ventura. I'm your host, David Starkey, and we'll see you next time.